Welcome to this online session. It's about how automation AI will de-risk the critical journey of migration towards SAP Integration Suite. And one can think in these transitions, what could all go wrong, right? And I want to sketch that situation. So these migrations, they're happening on big scale, and they can cause massive delays, meaning that stakeholders involved, they have to keep waiting for the actual realization of the migration. It can turn into a very big exercise, which can result into additional complexity, additional effort, additional cost. And in the end, the quality is key because no one wants to face productive issues, P1s, P2s, because of these kind of transitions. So I want to start with sketching that outlier, like the kind of forecast that could happen when you're not taking it in a de-risk approach. And today we're going to talk about how to prevent all of this, how to control all of that, and to be in a smooth position to migrate towards a new target platform for your legacy integration platform. So let's go see what we cover today and how we would structure it, how we are going to approach it. So we can talk to you about the agenda. So first of all, what is the scenario? What is this migration to integration suite? I just portrayed all the risks that are there lying around the corner, but what is it actually about? Of course, I raised the consequences of not mitigating the challenge as well, but what are those challenges? And what is the success or the the critical part of getting to the actual target situation, where we are in a stable, future-proof setup, and how can we get there soon, quick, not just talking about years down the line, but talking about months or eventually even weeks. And we want to show you how it's possible. So it's about the framework, but also about how to accelerate that due to AI and automation, and reflect on typical trajectories that we have been involved with accounts that lead to that success. So it's very important that this three-way axis of delay, cost, quality are managed properly, and we have a successful migration to execute. So let's look at the current scenario. What does it mean, migration to integration suite, and why would you migrate to integration suite? First of all, it's good to know, about Rojo, to explain a bit where we are coming from very quickly. So we are working as a strategic partner with SAP for, you can see over 1.5 decade. We have strategic partnerships with different parties next to SAP. And it's important to know that we are SAP Migration Factory partner. So we're doing these migrations day in, day out. And we're also working with SAP on their platform. So it's not just doing consultancy services. We are actually an innovator in the SAP B2P ecosystem and providing critical software that runs on SAP B2P together with SAP. So if we look at this statement about the scenario, so what are we facing today? More and more organizations, they are looking at their current integration stack and deciding on where to go, where to transition to. And there are multiple factors playing a role. First of all, cloud. You must have been aware that accounts and organizations, they're transitioning to more cloud-based integration stack. That's also why the SAP PO to SAP Cloud integration narrative is there from SAP perspective. But it's also other on-prem middleware that are due to be replaced for more modern cloud-based integration technology. However, there are more factors, like also consolidation. So it could be that you're facing with a lot of different integration technologies, and you want to unify that in one space, one integration suite. That could be SAP Integration Suite. Or we see organizations that, due to takeovers, mergers, acquisitions, are getting new technology stacks as part of the entire integration domain, and that also needs to be migrated and transitioned towards a new or the current integration stack, which could be SAP Integration Suite. Is there an audio issue that I see someone raise on the chat? But I believe it's okay what I hear from other signals. I see it's raised on the chat. I don't think there's a current issue. Can you confirm if you can hear it?
I think it's with one audience. So
right, I will
probably we
keep
can
an eye on the
continue.
chat
Yes.
to see if there's any issues,
Yeah.
but we continue. So
Yeah.
it's this consolidation, this migration towards cloud, and this legacy tech stack that we have in our in our organization. And SAP Integration Suite is the option to consolidate that, to unify that, and to have it all embedded in one platform. So now what we're going to talk about today is how to get there. How do you get there in a reliable, de-risked manner towards SAP Integration Suite? And I'm here with Ankit, who can explain in more detail what is possible today in order to realize that new reality of having all your integrations consolidated in SAP Integration Suite.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Sander, first of all, it's good to join you to talk about this topic. And I think, as you explained, the current scenario in the market where many companies, enterprises are moving towards SAP Integration Suite because of different reasons. And this migration journey have its own challenges. And in past, many times there has been a conventional way of approaching this migration where we have been doing a lot of manual steps for from the beginning of the migration where we are extracting the information from the source middleware. We are building these manually, all the artifacts, because many of these middlewares are not in SAP ecosystem or does not have SAP language to speak. So we have to do this manually in past, and which is a very time consuming process and takes a lot of time overall migration. Sometimes it easily turns into 1 or 2 year project of migration of these interfaces if you're talking about maybe 500 interfaces. And with AI and automation putting into picture, that changes the whole game for it. That how do we start evaluating our current landscape, our current middleware in such a way that we don't have to do it manually? If how do we convert the artifacts which we have in source middleware into the target platform, which is SAP CI, not doing it bit by bit, interface by interface, rather than building an automation with patterns in it to convert and migrate them to the target middleware, which is SAP CI. So this is exactly what we want to talk about today. And I think what is important here that we understand whenever we approach the migration, there are key phases in this migration journey. And in each of this migration phase, there are different challenges. And that's what we want to focus today on zoom in today and talk about how we can solve them. So what we will do today is let me go to the slide, next slide. Yes, we will focus on and zoom in each phase of the migration. We will talk about the challenges which we have. We will give some real life examples, how we have solved those using automations, by building automations. And when we are migrating them, what are the things we need to take care about, how to approach it in such a way that we don't migrate the problems. We are migrating in such a way that it is scalable in nature, it is ready for future, and we can support it in our target middleware as well. And how does a post migration look like? Because migration is not a journey, it's more of a process, and how we take care of things after that. That's also something which is important. And I think, Sandra, you would also agree if I pick the first phase of the migration. Um, in many of our projects which we have executed, a big problem which has come into picture is that the legacy middleware is almost like a black box. If we ask them, hey, do we have functional specification of this interfaces? The answer is mostly no. If we have technical requirements, technical specification of this interface well documented, even if it is there, it was not updated as we moved, maintained the interfaces or upgraded, added new functionalities.
Right. Let's face it, like if you're dealing with integrations that were designed, built 10 years ago or 15 years ago, how likely is it that the expertise is still around, that the documentation is still good on it? And we're talking about applications like TIBCO, WebMethods, BizTalk. So this can be from a long time ago. And I think the migration can also give the insight into this, right? Okay, not just keeping it as a black box.
Indeed, and it's almost like your key business process running on those middlewares, and you don't have have a complete summary of what is happening around. And if you think about numbers, if it is in hundreds, 500 interfaces, that's a big number where you have to manually go and extract all those information from that black box, almost, as we can say, right? So if we zoom in the first phase, let's look at this. What exactly do we need, right? We need the orchestration logic. How are we orchestrating between different applications in our enterprise? To which systems are we interacting? What are the routing logic we are doing? What are the filter logic we are putting in for each step which we have, right? So we need those information before we can start developing in our target middleware. We need to have our mapping logic. That's the key information in our source middleware, which we need to migrate. But we cannot read each mapping one by one and then convert into the target middleware manually. We can technically do it, but it will take ages to do the whole migration. And from our experience, whatever migration we have executed recently, making automations around mapping migrations saves the most times and de-risk the full migration to a large extent. And that is something we will also see it in action, how we do that. Extracting the configuration, all the externalized parameters, dynamic values, things which control the behavior of the interface, all these things has to be extracted. And you don't want to do it manually per interface and maintain it because of several reasons. And then the final thing, the payloads part of it, right? So once you are looking at each interface, you're almost looking at the history of what has happened in production, right? In terms of scenarios. And you need all those data sets to validate when you migrate to your new environment if the same output is coming or not, to do your regression testing, to validate your orchestration logic is intact, your mapping logic is intact. So this is all what we need when we talk about the extraction from source middleware. And I'm also thinking now, Sander, and this might be a good time. And if you want to add anything on top of this.
Yeah, I think this is the honest story, right? Because AI automation, it sounds like now out there that anything is possible with the press of a button.
Okay.
And I think the topics that we have outlined here, there definitely is a lot automation gain possible with AI automation, with also the and the tool, the suite that we would show. It's definitely possible. However, there is a side remark here, because you can take something that works and try to push it in a new platform and hope it still works. Just do input output translated. However, that's the reality check, is that in modern future integration architectures, there is much more to consider. You have to consider that, because you want these integrations to start living in a framework in your integration governance that feels right, and that's very important. And you don't want to transfer that depth with you. You want to make it ready so you can work with it in the future. And that's a big aspect. So yeah, how we're going to do this? I'm thinking about templates, or what is the approach to take this?
Yeah. No, I think
future.
definitely. It's almost like when we move to a new house, we don't want to keep all the legacy things which we had in our old house, right? We want to have a better energy rating. We want to have a better design, more sustainable design, which help us for a longer term, right? We prepare for the future. And that's exactly what we think in our next phase of the migration. And I think before even going to the next phase, what I would like to show you from our own experiences and the project which we have executed, how we have encapsulated all the automations in a tool when we do these kinds of extraction from the middlewares, be it Boomi, be it BizTalk, be it WebMethods, or for that matter, MuleSoft. So I think let's take a look at the tool which we would like to show you from the perspective of how it can help in overall acceleration of the migration. And then we will move towards the next phase of the migration. So what you see right now is a tool which we have built, but what it primarily offers is the aspect of how we can do the whole migration. We can go through the whole migration journey at a single place rather than doing it manually completely, doing the extraction part, doing the payload extraction part, testing that, migrating to the target system, in our case, which is SAP CI, and then taking it to the hypercare part, or post-migration part of it, right? So here what we will do, we will take example of Boomi. So we have already few interfaces which we have extracted from Boomi. And here we can take one example. So what you see right now is part of the same tool. And just to be clear, it's not about offering a tool here. It's more about the automation which we have built and is encapsulated inside this tool, and which we use in all of our migration projects. So wherever we are working with customers for migrations, and that was also the source of making this tool to bring all those automation together and give a face to that automation. And if we talk about Boomi migration, which we have executed multiple projects there, I will take one example here of an interface. So one, here we can run the extraction of all the Boomi processes or interfaces with their mapping logic, with their orchestration logic, with the schemas which are used, the structures which are used, the connection details which are used. Um, that can be extracted and is exactly what we are showing here. So if you see here, if I go to the the uh, the flow diagram, this is generated via AI. So the information was extracted from Boomi, and then we used AI to give a representation of the what is happening inside the middleware. So you don't have to manually go every time, understand what is happening from logical point standpoint, and you already have a complete flow diagram or sequence diagram of your interface. You have the information of all the component which is inside your interface. So it can be child interfaces or child process which is being called. It can be your message mappings for that matter. All these are message mapping. You have the details of all the connections which is made in your middleware. And if you open one of the mappings, say for example here, let me open one of it here. What you will see here is that you have information of all the source and the target field. You have in the information of all the structures which are used in your uh, existing middleware, in this case, Boomi and mapping. Depending upon your target state, you can also design those automation to convert these mappings into the format which is supported by your target middleware. It can be a message mapping, it can be an XLT, it can be a Groovy mapping, depending upon what priority is set according to your rules defined for your governance or let's say development standards in your SAP CI. But this, with this information in hand, it can be done. And this exactly in this case, for example, we can generate an XSLT of this particular mapping, which will be used in my artifact and CI. So this is what it means once we have an access to all this information at a central place, we can start adding more and more information to it to be able to generate artifacts, to be able to document the logic which was not there before um, in case of many legacy middlewares. And if I take a step back here, we were also talking about the payload part of it, right? So in most cases, we can also extract the payloads if it is being recorded in production, depending upon the different configuration, that for different process, what are the payload which is there for input and output. And by having these payloads, we can use them for doing our regression test in our target middleware. So here what you see is that we can run the test cases here also, but we will talk about it in our phase where we are focusing on how we do regression tests and what should be thinking about when we do regression testing after we have migrated. But this is the part where we are able to extract the information from my source middleware, be it mapping, be it orchestration logic. We can generate sequence flow diagram out of those orchestration logics to use it in our target middleware. And this is the standard, I think, a perfect example of what we were talking about, that now it's not anymore a black box. Now we have access to the whole information in our middleware. And it's almost like you were talking to this middleware, because we can have a functionality where I can ask to this middleware, hey, what's happening around this logic? What are we doing in this particular mapping? So it's almost like an agent which is talking to your existing middleware to a specific interface, to a specific mapping.
Yeah.
And getting your details which you would take multiple days if you have to do it manually with the help of a developer.
Now, when going back soon to the to the concept that we're discussing to go next, while you do it, and I can explain about how we also de-risk it in terms of the approach, because we first want to have a proof of value, to show how quickly things can be realized, taking a subset of the scope. And ultimately, we can also use all this insight that you just have to then easily see, oh, this is what it means on big scale, because we see the different complexity in the interfaces, we see the different, setups, artifacts. So if we have the proof of value very quickly, that we can see, oh, this is how we can do it for a few interfaces, then you can easily in your mind translate this to the entire scope, because you have all this insight in every single interface in your platform, regardless of the technology. So that becomes very powerful.
No, I think it's a very important point, Sander, and this exactly links to the second phase of our migration, where we are actually migrating the artifacts, right? Because having the information in hand, it already enables you to start defining your patterns, defining your templates, right? What does it mean? I think let's go to the next phase part of it to explain it in a better way. So whenever we think of now executing the migration, once we have extracted the information from my source middleware, many times we end up doing it one-to-one. So for each interface in my source middleware, I'm developing a middle target interface in my SAP Cloud Integration. But the question is, do we need to do this? Is it the right way of doing it? The answer is no. We have to think it from the way of standardizing as much as possible, introducing governance in the framework itself. And what does it mean? It means that we need to understand for the existing interfaces which we have in our source middleware, first of all, how does they fit in my target middleware in terms of technologies which it supports, right? The capabilities which is there, because we have to use the capabilities in SAP CI. On that basis, we define, okay, what are the different patterns do we have in my overall interface scope? And for each pattern, we define the templates for my development that has to be followed when we are developing these interfaces, or I would say generating these interfaces. And we will come to that point why we say generation rather than development. And for each of this template, it's not like we have to add error handling in every one of those individually, or logging mechanism in each of these interfaces individually. We should have framework for all of this mechanism embedded in the embedded in the cloud integration, and these are referenced across the patterns. So what does it mean? We are defining the reusable templates for ourselves and patterns for based on the patterns which we have. We establish the frameworks, which is for the patterns which we have. Maybe it could be event-driven pattern we are following for the pub sub part. We have an IDOC framework if we need to use IDOCs, because from the perspective of reprocessing, how it would work, we have to plan those things. For our error handling, for our logging, we have to have reusable scripts. You can't have repetitive artifacts in your different interfaces. You need to have a mechanism where you're building it one, maintaining it centrally, and it's used across your interfaces. And that's where you are preparing for your future. You are making your investment secure by defining all these standards. It's a one-time effort, but it pays out when you're done with your migration, we are supporting. And it's not only for migration, it's even for your new interfaces. You follow the same standards. And definitely, I would want to build the mappings manually, which is in my source system. Because mapping could be big, or they could be 250 fields in one mapping. We don't want to build all these mapping logics manually in our target middleware. And if we can have a mechanism where we can convert the existing mappings into the format which is supported by SAP Cloud Integration, that's the best case scenario for us. And here is where how AI help us in converting these mappings, which we are looking in our tool also, that how we can convert an existing mapping into an accessibility or a message mapping, depending upon the requirement which we have.
Yeah. So you're saying that the failure points that could be there embedded in the, you could say legacy platform.
Yes.
You don't want to take them one-on-one and bring those points of failure again in the new architecture, in the new platform.
Correct.
And the redesign aspect needs to be strongly considered, because you want to do the advantages that you just mentioned. Make sure that you have that embedded. And I think this is where for a lot of normal conversations, it stops here. Like the automation factor only goes that far.
Yeah.
But what we are saying is that also that part can be automated. You
Yes.
can automate the aspect of having your error handling embedded. You can automate that design pattern that you
Yes.
want to apply. You can make sure it's AMQP compatible in an automated way. So that also that part is not stopping you from finding the acceleration. Because I think that's what companies run into. Like, okay, I want a quick win, so just do lift and shift, do it quickly, translate the artifacts. If it operates, it's fine. But we want to go 3 steps further to say, actually, you should have it in your modern scalable architecture, decoupled, maybe use the pipeline concept, maybe you use a very advanced error handling setup. Let's embed it in the framework and then generate it accordingly so that you have it future-proof, scalable, with inside visibility on how the integration works. And then you can expand it on growing business demand and keep making your integration architecture future-proof.
No, it's a very important point, Sander, which you highlighted, because if we are doing this in the right way, this is opening the door for many automations which we can have. And we have learned this the hard way in all our migration projects, right? That doing it in the right, in building all these frameworks, all these patterns, we can already start generating artifacts. And this is what we did also for our Boomi migration, right?
Yeah.
For example, in this case, what we defined was that, okay, for every requirement which we extracted from our Boomi process, we defined what are the guidelines which we follow in CI. We already had templates built and embedded in our tool, and that templates were used to generate artifacts for this particular interface. So when I'm clicking on generate artifacts, basically what it is doing, it is basically going and uploading the, converting the objects into the target middleware and preparing already a skeleton where developer can start working on it. So we don't need to build anything from scratch.
To do the finishing touch.
Indeed. And you see here, after a few seconds, because it will definitely take some time, I have the artifacts created in my CI package that we can configure on the basis of how we want to do the packaging of these interfaces. That's totally up to us. But we have those artifacts created in our target middleware. So if I click on this one, for example, or I can also go directly to the iFlow which was created. And it is also showing me the referencing which it is doing right now. So since we already had those common error handling script collection for my logging, it is already saying that, hey, we are referencing this in our migrated iFlow in CI. So if I see it's because of some cache, it always gave this error. But within a few seconds, we should be able to see that how I'm able to or move my artifacts, extract the artifacts from my source middleware, look at the logic, understand it, and migrate it to my target middleware. And this is not done in days. We are talking about here minutes, seconds, right? If you see here, this is the interface which we just migrated, INF0110015, and it is referring to the common error handling framework or the logging mechanism which we have already built inside our package as a standard. So that's the beauty of what you highlighted, right? If we do it in the right way, if we plan it in the right way, we can save a lot of time in building these artifacts, or rather generating this artifact and referencing those standards and templates which we have defined.
Okay, but now there's a moment to stop, because I think what business would say, this is an IT project, this is an IT mission, and I have my orders working, I have my invoice interface, my procure to pay, my shop floor integrations. It's fundamental. They're running through this critical integration layer. Now, for me, what I care about is that fine that this transition is ongoing, but I don't want the business to be disrupted. I want these processes to keep being automated, that the objects are being synced, because this impacts my day-to-day 24/7 business. So you can have this all realized, embedded in your framework, have it future-proof, have it, in the best setup for integration suite, maybe even further decoupled. But how can we make sure that we give that certificate of proof towards business that everything will go without disruption?
Yeah, it's a very important aspect of the migration phase, if I would put it like this.
The hidden part sometimes, right? The hidden part.
At the end of the day, however we put it, this is a technical project for most of the business, right?
Yeah.
It's not bringing a new functionality to the business until unless you're adding something in your interface during migration. For them, it's almost like the same order is flowing from system A to system B. What happens in between? Mostly business is not worried about that or bothered about it, right? And we need to make sure and we need to show the proof to them, hey, the orders which were sent from system A, from SAP to your Salesforce is intact. There is no change in that. The same output is coming from your new middleware also. And that's where the regression plays a key role. And what we were talking about of extraction of the payload becomes relevant here. So if we talk about the next phase of the migration, which is where we are talking about how we are capturing the request and response payloads, how we are grouping them for each interface, how we're grouping for each scenario, so we don't just do random production payloads. We categorize them on the basis of scenarios, create, update, or delta logic. All those scenarios, we try to have a coverage of the scenarios. And for all those payloads, we create the test cases, execute them in our target middleware, and we have a summary of the results as an output, where we are comparing the output from our source middleware to the target middleware and showing it to the business. Hey, we executed 150 test cases or 200 test cases with different scenarios. These were the process order numbers. These were the order numbers. And this is the result of your migration. So it is a proof to the stakeholders that the migration has not impacted any business logic and it is giving the same output. So you would like to do still for some tests, but then you don't need to test every scenario because it is being already validated using regression tests. And I think if I show some example of it, um, hopefully it should be a bit visible in the screen. It's a screenshot of the dashboards which we generate out of the tool as well, which shows the different interfaces based on the categorization, the number of test cases which we have covered, the pass rate for these interfaces, the assertions which we have done in terms of comparison of the field logic, which is needed by the business. All those are presented in this dashboard, which can be presented to the stakeholders or used for also the future reference of this after migration. And this becomes your certificate of trust for your stakeholders that the migration is intact and is successful.
Yes, yeah, because it has the business related
Context.
information. You can see from this location for this type of a region, this type of business, this sales order number, this purchase order type.
True.
So you kind of have the report of proof that you give to your business to say, hey, this all looks good.
Yeah, and you don't need to test the whole interface manually because that will actually increase your whole migration time. What you want to do is do unit testing, do some round of testing, but rely a lot on your regression test to cover the majority of your scenarios. That will really accelerate the whole migration process.
Yeah, what I also think is that people then think, oh, we said we can generate part of it, so is it then like this, that everything works end to end? And I also want to portray the honest story because the bridge is there, is the integration layer, and the bridge is only of purpose if it's connected to source and target. So you can validate the bridge does what it does, but you still need to make sure it's connected end to end to fulfill that purpose. And there's still time alignment still there. Like, I mean, that is also the honest story to portray, because it could be that something with an adapter or connection has to be adjusted, tweaked. We have to always be in sync with the application teams on these topics. That's very important and fundamental to understand, because the bridge itself is worthless if it's not connected towards the source and receiver applications, which are using variety different of stacks. They might themselves change. They might also be in transitioning towards the Cobalt architecture to be compatible with that. There's so many aspects there also that one should not ignore, because an interface full purpose is when it's connected end to end, right? That's very important to highlight. But this is clear about the part of the validation that you need to show it's still working for business. Otherwise, it becomes a complete rethinking of.
It is basically ensuring the investment which you are doing, the process which you have done, the automations are giving you the output which are valid for your target state.
And it means you don't have to bother business as much as part of this transition.
Yes, because that's another difficulty. If you have to get time for each interface, it's a big commitment to ask from business as well.
Yeah, the functional requirements are not being rediscussed.
No,
it's about that should still facilitate the same automation of the business process.
True. Okay, and I think also let's look at the part of what happens after we have migrated, right? The part of supporting these interfaces in production, and this is also where we have to think in advance that when we are building these interfaces, we are defining the framework. We have made sure that we have the traceability of interfaces. We are able to search for order numbers. We should have that mechanism embedded in our interfaces that I can search based on my process order number. I can search on the basis of my customer number or my material master number, product ID. All these things should be available because this will make sure when I move to my production, if and something is happening, I'm able to support those interfaces. I'm able to take care of issues which is happening in production. And that makes the whole process smooth in the cutover phase during the hypercare, which we do. And that's basically, it's also giving a closure to the whole migration journey after this part. And I think if we talk about this, all the process which we have done, the framework which we have established, the regression test and these things, does it go waste after we have done the migration? I think that's also very important aspect to look at, right? It is because after migration, all these things becomes your base of maintaining this interface. I don't know if you want to add, Sander, anything about this.
It's very important that in this transition, it's not a must-have acquisition how it felt, but it's actually you have won certain things because you have won the visibility in your interfaces. You have won that they are now running on your target integration setup, which should be embedded within governance. And now you can have those interfaces. You understand everything about them, and you can you have to have them modernized as well according to your framework. So now you're there to any new business requirement that comes in, you can take it as we go. And I think you also want to explain how that can be accelerated.
Indeed. Because if I think
it's not static.
After how you added the points of this one, any new functionality comes in. I already have the test cases which I have executed, right? So if I am adding a new functionality to my migrated interface, I just need to re-execute those test
Regression
cases.
is a no-brainer now.
Regression is a no-brainer. I can reuse my test cases created to validate my interface is intact after even adding a new functionality. I just need to enhance or add one more test case for the new functionality. Documentation part, I already have documented, extracted from my middleware, generated for my new target state, and I can keep updating this. And we all know AI and agents are doing this already. We have so many customers where we are already doing the documentation part using agents, and that is something can be taken further to keep your documentation updated for the new functionalities. Mapping part, we already had the mapping migrated. If you're adding, we don't need to add them manually, right? That's also the benefit which comes with following the framework, the standard, because we know we are not impacting the whole framework. We are just adding a new field in my mapping, and that can also be done via the AI assisted.
We are ready for the new model of kind of like dynamically updating our integrations or making via agentic AI our integration setup be aligned with the new business requirements that are there. So there's no black box situation here anymore.
So this is almost like your migration. It should become a starting point for you to start using all these frameworks, your templates, and AI becomes an catalyst to do all these things in overall journey. So I think this is how we can look at all the phases of migration and how it can support us. And I think, Sander, we also all this experience which we are sharing here is coming from our real-time experience. So I think it would be good to also show some customer success story which we have successfully migrated. So I think maybe you would like to talk about this one.
Yeah, exactly. So there's different cases that you see out there and different reasons that we started with. In this case, it's actually more unification transition where it was looked at to rebalance the integration platforms and go towards integration suite in this case. And it was mostly like a lot of complexity was embedded in the logic of the interface in Boomi in this case, and the same situation that you explained about these were created over a timeline of 15 years. So it means that the interface grew over time, but at some point also there was already in place Integration Suite. So some newer implementations were done on Integration Suite, which meant that there was a kind of standstill of new requirements coming in for the existing platform, which means it was basically more in support mode rather than new things being created. Which means that the integration knowledge is kind of slowly slipping out, because only when there's a P1 or an issue of production, then the team comes in to look at it, and it means that kind of gap of understanding what's happening in the system. It started to grow bigger and bigger because new requirements were taking in the target platform. The testing part was very important to make sure that could be validated. And the key result was to minimize business disruption here critically, because the goal of the platform was not, of this migration platform transition, was not only about doing it fast, but also to make sure there's absolutely no business impact. And it was measured by the amount of priority incidents that were created afterwards, which is striking. And I remember that sometimes you have this discussion in this kind of migration: was this incident or this issue, was it already there in the as this situation, or was it a flaw of the migration? And there I think we are here, let's say, very transparent on it. Like these things, this discussion you will have, because you're kind of migrating it based on the logic that is there, and you also do the part of redesign. But it could be that there's something that was already embedded in that could have been maybe resolved during the transition, but it was maybe a known issue that was there from a couple of situations before, prior to this migration. So in the end, this was executed very, very quickly towards production, and the amount of redesign is there a component to consider in whether how much you can accelerate. And ultimately, like 85% of the migration was really automated, and it led to this success to go really towards prod very quickly. One thing that I want to highlight, which is coming up shortly, is how can we do that proof of value so quickly? Because that was also a fundamental part of this success, that prior to this, we ran a pre-project assessment, pre-project approach, which resulted into the proof is in the pudding, the proof is in the actual interfaces, and that gave a lot of confidence to accelerate. So how do we de-risk this, not only from technology side, but also in terms of method? How do we approach it in a de-risked manner, and how do we fast track that? So automation, we talked about it. We embed also the fit to make sure it's part of your modern governed architecture, even going towards pipeline concept, decoupling it further. And that's why we can get that triple acceleration in full motion. And it's from the extraction toward production code over and beyond. Like what Ankit was also explaining, when you have it set up in your framework, you can then let the interfaces grow with increasing business demand, even in the now new ways of working that are possible. And the end-to-end validation is very critical. But I think the next page is where everything comes together. The proof of value is very important, because you can start something from zero and get into a trajectory where you don't know how it will end and how it will go. Or you can scope it very concretely to say, hey, we have a huge scope of interfaces. Let's pick a subset of it. Let's pick 15, 10 interfaces, and see the value in weeks. And that's what we are doing. All these migration trajectories, you can do it in entirely and then have monthly steering committees look at how things are going. Or you can say, hey, we do our mini migration already. We see everything, every risk for our organization is already closed out.
Yes.
And then, like what you showed with the insight of the insight that you showed about the interfaces already of everything there in the platform, you can then how do you say, translate it to what it means for the entire scope. And that's the approach that we believe in. So in weeks, get end-to-end validated interface in SAP Integration Suite. And this is really possible by doing this checklist 2 weeks in advance. We need to have, of course, access, connections need to be set up, all of those. That checklist needs to be there. And then you can execute at the moment that it's there very rapidly by doing the extraction, like Ankit mentioned. You execute the generation of the artifacts, you do the regression validation over it, and that stage is actually the closure. So we have a fully end-to-end validated subset of your interfaces already running on SAP Integration Suite that are ready for production rollout. And in that way, you just reduce the amount of surprises later on to
Indeed.
drastically, to a minimal amount. And that's also as part of the SAP Migration Factory, partnership that we have with SAP. That's where we believe in, because it puts our skin in the game, make sure that we show how it works directly. And from whatever audience you have in the organization, you can show this proof of value and then execute it smoothly towards the entire set of interfaces. I think very important to do it like this, so you de-risk and you're in full control.
Yeah, I think very rightly said, Sander. It's almost like buying an insurance policy for yourself already, right? So before doing the whole commitment for your big migration project, you are selecting all the difficult interfaces or patterns in your whole landscape and showing that it can actually work. And I think the concept which we showed here and through a tool, it's not about the tool, it's about the whole concept, right? How we are able to set up those standards together in this pre-project phase. We define those automation, what can be automated and what cannot be automated, and do that proof of concept for these selected interfaces in the pre-project and show that it is working like this. We are almost building a pipeline of migration, how we do that, how the mechanism of doing it in different scenarios.
Right.
And we come with all the experience we have from other migration projects can be embedded in these.
Yeah. As integration architects, we know it's not just about showing here, you have 3 generated iFlows and this is the proof. No, that means it's connected. It's adjusted to your framework, decoupled, and the proof is there with the regression testing, where it's shown that it's working end to end based on the test cases that were retrieved from the payloads from your legacy integration application. That is the recipe to success for these kind of migration trajectories.
So I'm also looking at time. We have
a few minutes over time. If there are any questions, I think this is the moment to do it. We will close with showing a reference to where you can get in contact for an assessment and for starting, such a pre-project to see that proof of value right away. And if there are any questions, let us know. This is the moment to ask them.
Yeah.
We will keep posting more about this topic. We have our LinkedIn community as well that you can join. And for any question, you can also separately reach out. So I would like to thank everyone joining this session. Hope it was insightful to see what are the success factors to get quickly to a reliable, smooth migration towards SAP Integration Suite. Thank you for your time and see you in the next one.